The Torah tells us in Parshas Ki-Tetze, Parachav Beis, chapter 22, verse 11 and 12, Pasuk Yud Aleph Yud Beis, Gedilim taselach al abra kanfos kasuska asher techasabo. The Torah tells us, again in Parashas Shlach as well, the Torah talks about the mitzvah of tzitzis. And again here in Parashas Ki-Tetze, the Torah talks about the mitzvah of tzitzis. And Chazal point out the juxtaposition between the two psukim. The pasuk right before the mitzvah of tzitzis talks about the prohibition of shatnez. Well, still by shatnez, semel pishtem yaktav. You can't mix wool and linen together. You violate a biblical prohibition of shatnez. And right afterwards, the Torah tells me the mitzvah of tzitzis. What does tzitzis have to do with shatnez? So Chazal tell us, and it's a discussion in the Gemara Menachos, whether which garments are biblical. So everyone agrees to wool and linen. We b'nei Ashkenaz paskin, even shar begadim, even cotton and other begadim must still fulfill a mitzvah in our Torah. Let's work with the other opinion and the minhag of the Sephardim, that only wool and linen garments, if you're wearing a four-cornered woolen garment or a four-cornered linen garment, you're obligated min HaTorah in the mitzvah of tzitzis. So normally you have wool tzitzis, the strings, the wool fringes, and you have a wool garment, so it's not an issue. But if you have a linen garment and you have woolen strings, so you are combining wool and linen, which is normally a biblical prohibition. Comes along the Torah and says, and we learn out the principle from here as well of Aseh doche lo saseh. The positive commandment of tzitzis overrides the negative commandment of shatnez. Like we find as well by the big day kahuna, the beged, the garment the Kohen wears, that also has shatnez, because the mitzvah of wearing the clothing for the mitzvah of wearing the priestly garments overrides the prohibition. So we see aseh docha lo saseh. However, the Rishonim point out, there's a discussion in the Mishnah as well in Menachos whether hatecheles ma'akeves es halavan. There's a mitzvah as well. There's a mitzvah of tzitzis, and part of the mitzvah of tzitzis is a mitzvah of techeles, of finding a certain snail, a fish, a chilazon, and getting blue dye and putting it on the strings. So when do we say aseh doche lo saseh, that the mitzvah aseh of tzitzis beats out the prohibition of shatnez? That's when you're doing the mitzvah bishleimuso, when you're doing the mitzvah in its complete form, by having the tzitzis together with the techeles. But if you're wearing tzitzis without the techeles, you're not fulfilling the mitzvah in its ideal state, and hence we don't apply aseh doche lo saseh. So bizman hazeh, if you're wearing a linen garment, you cannot have wool threads. You'd have to have linen threads. So therefore, we don't. To the custom today is we wear a woolen garment with woolen threads. However, it touches on the possibility today about restoring a lost mitzvah that hasn't been around for 900, 1,000 years. People today, the whole story with Rabbi in the late 1800s, Rav Herzog afterwards, and today, and also in the late 1990s, they've been working on whether they have found the actual techeles. So the Radvina Rebbe has been proven to be the incorrect, even though the Hasidim don't think so, they wear it. And Rav Herzog has been incorrect. And in the 1990s, they found, I think, the Murex trunculus, some type of snail, which people claim is the real techeles. So obviously that's a point of contention today, whether it is the real techeles. and that's a discussion among the contemporary poskim, whether there's a famous Maisa with the Beis HaLevi, where when the Ravina Rabbi in the 1880s said he found the Tcheles, he asked all the Gedolim to respond. So he has all these letters printed up in the Sefer. So what happened was, when he got the letter, he said, the Beis HaLevi himself didn't write, but someone close to him wrote back and said, you know what, if you found the Tcheles, I'd be the first one to wear it. However, this cuttlefish that you claim to have found, this is known to all our previous generations. My parents knew about it, grandparents, great-parents, all the Gedolim knew about it. And they never said this was it. So if you give me an historical reason why this new fish just came along and no one knew about it, then we could discuss wearing it. But this fish is well known to everyone, so it's a de facto Mesorah. This isn't it. The fact that we knew about this fish and the Gedolim didn't say it was it, therefore I reject it. That's the version of the Beis HaLevi in the Sefer. The version of the Beis HaLevi from Rav Soloveitchik in New York, Boston, and the Briskers in Yerushalayim, they have a different version. They say, the Beis HaLevi said, even if you're right, you're wrong. Even if you could prove to me 100% that the Tcheles is real, we need a Mesorah to bring it back. You need a Mashiach, you need Simanim. And therefore, until the Mashiach comes, the mitzvah of Tcheles will not be returned. There's a tremendous practical difference between the two approaches. In fact, the Badei HaShulchan, Raphael Cohen, who had a close kesher with Rabbi Yoshev Zatzal, and they corresponded, and one of the questions he asked Rabbi Yoshev was, which two versions of the Beis HaLevi does he think is correct? The first version that I would consider Tcheles, if you could give me a reason why it's just been found now. In other words, he's open to, or the other one where basically you need a Mesorah. So Yoshev thought the original version makes more sense to him, that in theory we shouldn't rule it out for no reason. However, he wasn't willing to come ahead and say, and he said, would you think it's the real one? And that's so he wasn't, at least in his Chuvas, he wrote that no, that Rav Herzog was wrong, and the Ravina Rabbi was wrong, who's maybe in 10 years from now this will be proven wrong, so it'll be a galechter, it'll be a joke. Every 10 years someone comes along and says they found it Tcheles, so he wrote he's not willing to endorse it. That's what he wrote. In other words, other people have different versions about what happened. That this is the way Rav Shachter says it, this is the version he believes, which he himself wears Tcheles. He thinks this is it, or at least it's a suffix Tcheles. That this is what the Tcheles people told him. Rabbi Yoshev agreed with them that this was it, but he said, are you going to have enough for thousands of people? Because if I announce it's it, everyone's going to wear it. They said no. And supply and demand will move up to like $1,000, and a lot of people are starving, so he wasn't. So Rav Shachter claims, based on the Shatnez people, that he really thought it was it, but for other meta halacha reasons, he didn't want to come out saying to do it, and plus he writes in his other reasons why he doesn't think. So, whatever the reason, Rabbi Yosef didn't wear it. So the question is, so we said we don't say Aseh Dochalos Aseh, we only say it when we have the Tcheles. So even those in, let's say, Rav Hershel Schachter's camp, who thinks that it's enough of a suffix Tcheles that we should be wearing it, even he's not going to wear wool and linen. He's still not going to wear a linen garment, because that you need b'Torah Tzvadai. And others claim that no, that we don't say here. Rav Shachter claims it's enough of a doubt, and we go with the basic principle of Savek Daraisa L'Chumra. A doubt regarding a biblical law we're strict on, and therefore that's why we should wear the Tcheles. Rav Shlomo Miller, a big posek in Toronto, he disagrees and says we don't say Savek Daraisa L'Chumra in this case, based on a Rav Chaim Soloveitchik Mipi Hashmua, that basically says the only time we say Savek Daraisa L'Chumra, doubt regarding a biblical law we're strict on, that's only if the next time you do it, you're going to fulfill the mitzvah. If you shook the four species with a doubtful lulav and esrog, and then you got a vadai one, so you shake it again. But to shake the suffix one again and again, there's no point. So Rav Shlomo Miller claims so too here, since we don't know, by wearing the tchelos, we still have the same doubt we had before. We don't know it's it, so therefore we don't apply suffix daraisa l'chumra, since we can't say that we know we fulfilled our mitzvah. And Rav Schechter claims that Rav Chaim's against a Ran and Sukkah. That the Ran and Sukkah writes, let's say it's Ben HaShemashos, the first day of, between the first and second day of Sukkah, so it's the status after sunset is Safek Yom Safek Laila. The Ran writes, if you haven't taken a lulav and esrog, and that's the first chance, you should still take it. So we see the Ran says Safek Daraisa L'Chumra, even though you don't know for sure you have fulfilled the mitzvah because it's Ben HaShemashos. So this seems to go against Rav Chaim's principle. So Rav Shlomo Miller says no, it doesn't go. You don't understand Rav Chaim. You have to understand Rav Chaim's not saying. Rav Chaim knew the Ran and he agrees with the Ran. The distinction Rav Shlomo Miller makes is that in the case of the Ran, it's nothing Safek Daraisa L'Chumra because you shook the lulav and esrog, and that's it. There's nothing more for you to do. Either you have it or you didn't have it. So, but now after you shook the lulav during Ben HaShemashos, there's no more work for you to do. Whether either you have the mitzvah or you don't. Mashenke by the techeles, even if you put on the techeles, you're still going to have to go around. You're still going to go around checking and making sure that it's the right one. So therefore, what the Ran is saying, Safek Daraisa L'Chumra, if there's nothing more else to do. But in the case of the Chelas, we're still looking, so therefore we don't say it. So that's a contemporary machlokes between Rav Shlomo Miller and Rav Hershel Schechter, whether you apply Safek Daraisa L'Chumra and whether you should be wearing Chelas today. And both of them feel very strongly on the topic. Rav Shlomo Miller writes that he doesn't think it's a Techeles, so therefore you shouldn't be wearing. Because according to those who think it is a Techeles, he thinks you're causing yourself bigger problems because you're going to be in violation of another biblical principle, Baal Tosef, about Tigra, adding or subtracting to the Torah. In other words, he says like this: there's a machlokes rishonim on how many strings the Techeles should be. 1, 2, 4. So it's not clear how we paskin. So therefore, if the luck is really you should have 4 and you only put on 2, so you violate Baal Tigra. And if you only put on 2, it should be 4. Or if you put on 4 instead of 2, so it's Baal Tosef. If you put on 2 little, it's Baal Tigra. So he says, according to me, it doesn't make a difference because it's not real. But according to you, that you think it's real, you have a bigger problem. You might be in violation about Tigra u'Baal Tosef. And Rav Schechter says, no, it's not a kasha. It's like any other kol hora. If you have to figure it out, you figure it out. You take the kolim of Shas and you figure out who he paskin like. And Rav Schechter, on the other hand, he says equally as strong. He says those who don't wear tcheles better not to wear tzitzis at all. He wears tzitzis with tcheles. But what do you mean better not to wear tzitzis at all than to wear tzitzis without tcheles? Because he calls in the Beis Halevi, the Turi Even, when do you violate Baal Tigra? So the Turi Even, I think based on a Rashba and Rosh Hashanah, that let's say on the Mizbeach you're supposed to sprinkle the blood with 4 corners, and you only do 2. So in a case where you need 4, and if you don't do 4, you don't get the mitzvah, so that's nothing. You're about to a mitzvah, you didn't get the mitzvah. But if b'diavad 2 works, but l'chadchila you need 4, so you're doing the mitzvah b'gerus, you're doing the mitzvah in a non-optimal way. So the Turi and the Beis Halevi says that's Baal Tigra. If you could do a mitzvah l'chadchila and you only do it b'diavad, that's Baal Tigra. So Schechter claims today we have an opportunity to do the mitzvah of tzitzis b'shleimuso with the cheles. So therefore, if you choose to do it without the cheles, you are in violation of Baal Tigra. So better not to wear a 4-corner garment at all, and therefore just not get the mitzvah. You don't get an aveira per se, but you're being mavatel a mitzvah aseh of tzitzis. It's better not to do the mitzvah of tzitzis than to violate Baal Tigra. So you have strong feelings on both sides. So in terms of whether we could have a further discussion on the share on tcheles, but you speak to your local posek to see what you should do regarding wearing the tcheles.